Hello and welcome to another video. So we're going to be taking a look at a few budget decks. I talked about these in a past video that we would be going over a few of the budget decks that were on the Mana Surge tier list website. So I wanted to cover a few of them. I thought they'd be quite nice for beginning players or new players that are coming into the game. So why not cover some pretty cheap decks that aren't too bad or too expensive to really play out and that tend to do reasonably well. Of course, these decks aren't going to have a super positive win rate as they are budget orientated and they will get crushed by a lot of high-end meta decks, but these should be a good starting point and a good point for you just to kind of jump into the game and get a feel for some of the crafts and stuff like that. So we're going to have Haven, then we have what else we got? We've got something else I forgot next, and then we have Forest. So pretty sure we have Mysteria Rune next actually. So either way, going to be a little bit of fun. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it. We're going to get right into this and check it out. And so kicking us off for our first game, Haven against Rune. Rune has been reasonably popular in the current meta. It's still quite a strong deck and handles itself quite well. And of course, this Haven deck being, of course, budget orientated and being a lion based deck is still pretty decent. It can be a little tricky to find the lethals, but once you get there and you've had a bit of practice with it, it's usually not too bad. Especially since it can both be slow and fast, which is always a good thing, so being able to handle itself in the mid to late game is always good. It's usually in the early game this deck can struggle at all. I did start off fairly early going for the Featherfall Hourglass. I was looking for a more tempo orientated game, going as early as I possibly could. And then kind of just hitting face wherever you kind of can to get that damage in, which is always an important factor. But of course we get slammed pretty hard with the removal. At least I should be able to take these fairly well, just flood the board as much as possible. Rune, not a problem. I'll be able to cope with Rune. It's going to clear the 3-2 node out, so we should be able to just banish that with Black Conscripture pretty easily. Or maybe just Prism Swing, either way. It's going to be a fairly decent removal and setup for the Holy Lions, a little bit more damage to face, and we're looking to have a pretty stable board to start off our game. Wind Blast is always rough, but definitely one you're willing to accept when it's on something like that. And now the slow but steady spell boosting from our opponent. The Magic Owl, definitely not something I like to come up against. But we should be able to handle it fairly reasonably. We'll set up a few cards, fill our board, get that 5 damage to face, leave them on 9. And have ourselves pretty well set up. As long as they can't completely wipe this board, we should be fine. And it's looking like they're going to really struggle wiping this, which obviously was the case, so definitely worked in our favour there. So the Lion deck's idea is mainly just to pressure out opponents, which is why it does quite well against Rune and tends to do well against Blood. Of course, it does lose pretty hard to the Haven mirror match because it can struggle quite a bit to get off the ground. And then of course it can struggle quite a bit in the sword match, which is a little disappointing. Dragon I found is fairly even, just depending on what dragon draws, but overall these two matches are usually the better two and the ones you want to focus on if you're a new player. Like if you feel like the latter is starting to have a lot more Blood or Rune in it, you could definitely start flinging this deck at face and do fairly well with it, I feel. At least based on the play that I've used it in both now and in the past. I've used very similar decks to this one. So this one we tried to go for a much more Holy Lion focused play. We had the setup for it, so why not? And Blood itself isn't going to clear us out super early, so we should be able to take the initiative. Peace Weaver is going to be fairly decent as a ward, and we're going to still get a bit more damage, while also having that Holy Lion Crystal set up really nicely there. It's definitely going to be hard for Blood to fully take us on here. They're going to have to use a few cards to at least clean these off. Gift of the Blood's a good option. And Wings of Lust. Alright, that's really, really well done right there. Fortunately for me, I did draw Hollow Dogma, which made this play so much quicker and easier to do, as I can just remove Vera. And I set up a little bit more card draw. We're not really lacking cards, but it never hurts to play your card draw where you have the chance, and considering that was reasonably on curve, just getting a 1 off that is fine. Even if it just thins our deck out a little bit. Which in this deck is kind of your main aim. You want to thin your deck out as much as possible to get as many of the cards you need into your hand. So we have the chance to go for the Holy Lion. And just a casual Unicorn with an Evo, be able to take on the 4-1 pretty easily. It was definitely a slower matchup against the Bloodcraft player, mainly because they put a fair bit of pressure down themselves, which required me to deal with it. But from about next turn onwards, we should be able to pretty much take the game into our realm of possibility, where we just kind of hit them over and over again with Holy Lions until they concede. So now that we're on the 4-4 Lions, we're looking real positive. And that was a lot of self-damage for our opponent to take. So we have 3 damage on board, we have 2 Holy Lion Crystals in our hand. We should actually be able to just pull off what I want here and go for the Gold Lion. Thanks to these 2 Holy Lion Crystals, we can go for 3 play with the Evo, putting us at 9 damage total for an exact lethal. Worked out pretty much perfectly for us, which is awesome. So if you guys did enjoy this video, this budget deck is fairly stable. I would probably say it's one of the better budget decks that I'm covering for these videos for you guys. I've tried a few other budget decks, but these are kind of the 3 that I've felt most comfortable with so far, and what I felt like was a good representation of different crafts. Plus, I don't do a lot of forest videos, which is why we're going to be covering that as a budget deck, even though I could probably cover a better dragon deck, honestly. So if you guys do enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Be sure to check out the rest of the channel. There's always content coming out, so hopefully you guys will enjoy everything. Until next time, see ya.